Hi, here's May, and welcome to the first video about drawing Genshin Impact characters as idols. This was a bigger project I worked on, and since I made many designs and illustrations for characters in different idol groups, I want to talk about each group in a separate video. I will also make a video talking about my overall preparation for this project and the process I used for the different illustrations. However, I thought it would be nice to first already see some illustrations and then be able to understand how I approached making them. So in today's video, I want to just focus on the characters of the first idol group. I talk about their designs and what stood out to me when drawing them. Then I also mention what kind of idol I imagined they would be. Genshin Impact and idol anime are two of my biggest interests, and I loved combining them for this project. In today's video, I'll talk about the first idol group, which would be Nebulous. They have a dark supernatural aesthetic and do rock music that is sometimes mixed with a bit more classic or futuristic electronic music. Here is a small mood board I made for this group. A few aesthetics that they would be inspired by would include fantasy, astronomy, dark academia, Y2K, wizard core, space core, and spirit core. I also mentioned some idol groups they're inspired by after I talked about all the characters. Who are the members of this group? Leave a guess in the comments before I now move on to talk about the first one. Also, here is how I show the illustrations in this video. I show the time lapses for them, but for one of the members I'll instead include parts from my full screen recorded files. I won't show the full process since it would include a lot of mirroring and moving around. I mean, here's an example of how my file would look if I were to speed it up enough so that it fits into this video. However, I hope through seeing the time lapses as well as parts of the full screen recorded process, you can get a better idea of how I drew the illustrations. The first member in this group is Dainsleif, and it's kind of funny that we're starting off with a character that isn't even released as playable yet, but I think most people know him since he's already been there pretty early on in the game. The first illustration I made for him would be for his overall design. In one of the poses, I wanted him to look more intimidating and expressive, and went with one where it looked a bit like he was walking. He also would have one of his hands at his head. For the other pose, Dainsleif was standing with his back turned to the viewer. This fit to Dainsleif being more mysterious to me. For this idol AU, I wanted to draw the idol outfits as well as a modern outfit I would imagine them wearing in their day-to-day life as idols when they're not on stage. In Dainsleif's modern outfit, it looks a bit like he's about to grab the hood of his jacket. It's always nice to have characters interact with something when drawing them in poses, for example with parts of their outfit. A jacket with a hood again fits to Dainsleif's more mysterious vibe to me. Other than that, he has a shirt with a pattern, jeans and sneakers as well as a bag. Since one of his poses was from the back, I also wanted the jacket to have a pattern there. Designing the idol outfit for this first group was fun. I went with a longer jacket that was supposed to be a bit like leather. The pants also were made of leather, a bit shiny and rather tight. For shoes, I went with some boots. Then I added in some belts and gloves as accessoires. I used star shapes at different parts of the outfit as patterns as well. For the belts, I had them be at a different position for each of the members. I used a mostly black palette for this idol group because of their darker aesthetic and theme. So I went with a black jacket, slightly brighter black pants and silver parts for the color and accessoires. The only colorful part in this idol outfit would be the shirt, and for Dainsleif this was blue, fitting to his eye color. For the modern outfit I had some versions including white, black and blue color-wise at first, and I went with a white jacket, blue shirt and black pants in the end. Let's now talk more about the accessoires. While I drew some in at first, I decided to add on some more after I had drawn the full body illustrations. And for the idol outfit, I went with belts around the torso, leg and arm. A necklace, a accessoire around his hip, as well as belts around his legs are accessoires I added for the modern outfit here, other than the bag I had drawn in at first. Other than adding accessoires, after I was done with the full body illustrations, I also adjusted parts of them. Things I adjusted here were the legs, hands and the perspective of the patterns of the idol outfit on his back. I also wanted to draw a more detailed CG-like illustration inspired by some of my favorite idol anime fandoms like Ensemble Stars or Idolish 7. For this, I will also show parts of the full screen recorded process for one of the members later on. Here I won't go into too much detail of my exact process for the whole illustration since I have multiple characters to talk about. In case you want to know more about my full illustration process, which I also used for making the illustrations here, you can check out this video. I went with a camera angle from below for this idol group. The viewer was looking up at the characters. Since I used Clip Studio Paint to come up with the poses, I was able to make sure that the perspective would stay the same for all illustrations for this group. The pose I used for drawing Dainsleif was from the front. He has one hand stretched out towards the viewer and one held up. At first, this arm was higher and the hand behind his head, but I decided to lower it and show his hand. The head and shoulders were also at different angles to make the pose more dynamic. I sketched in a lot of variations of his jacket here. I was unsure if I wanted it to flow to the back or to the front and went with a version to the front in the end. Dynamic, colorful lighting is often used for CG illustrations like here, so I definitely wanted to include this as well. Pink light from the right and a blue rim light from the left is the lighting I went with here. Other than this, I just used my regular shading process. Just like with the full body illustrations, I adjusted the illustrations after I was done with drawing them for the first time. For the background, I went with stage lights, stage railings and some light effects. I wanted this to fit to the lighting I had painted in and used blue and purpley colors. You will see that for all illustrations of this group, I reused the background, only changing up a few parts slightly. I did this for one to save time on drawing the backgrounds, mostly because I wanted all illustrations to line up together. So if you put them next to each other, it would look like the group is standing together on the same stage. Similarly to what I did for the full body illustrations, I adjusted parts of the idol CG after I had drawn them at first. For most of the characters, I adjusted the head, added smaller hair strands and painted over parts, also adding in hue variation as well as depth to some of the clothes. As you could maybe already tell from the time-lapse, as I was drawing this, the face shape was the most difficult thing to figure out to me. Another thing I adjusted here was also the perspective of the upper accessoire in front of his upper body. Then I added in some lights on his pants and painted over parts. And the last thing I'll talk about for each character would be who I'd imagine they would be as an idol and other idol characters they remind me of. For Steve, I don't think he would be a very outgoing, expressive idol, but he would take the job very seriously and be very good at it. Steve is an INTJ. Most of the characters I'm mentioning that remind me of Steve have the same or a similar MBTI type. Do you know about MBTI types? For comparing characters and looking for similarities, I find looking at these personality types really interesting. I also drew the MBTI types a while ago and talked more about the types back then, but now onto idol characters that remind me of Steve. First we have Shu, Kaito, Ran, Aichi, Himaru and Izumi from Ensemble Stars. Then we have Gaku, Sogo and Iori from Idol 7. Next would be Onsai and Yuduki from B Project. And finally Jakurai, Juto and Sayuta from Hypnosis Mic. And the next character in this group would be Kaya. For the poses, I went with rather expressive ones. He has one of his arms more stretched out, fitting to his more extroverted personality. Outfit-wise, I went with a sweater that had an open cut at the chest as well as tight jeans with a belt and sneakers. I went with different positions for the belts around the upper body for the idol outfits. To make the outfits for each character be a bit more different, I also had Kaya wear his jacket on his shoulders. They are attached to his belt accessoires. For the color of his shirt, I went with purple fitting to his eyes. For the modern outfit, I had 3 color variations, a purple sweater with black or white jeans as well as white sweaters with blue jeans. Which version do you like most? I added some accessoires around Kaya's belt, arms and above his feet here. Then I also wanted to include a bag, but I decided not to do this since the outfit seemed too busy with this. On his hoodie I added a accessoire so it would be attached somewhere in the middle. I made Kaya's legs shorter, and finally also I noticed I forgot Kaya's hair strand on the left side of his head for one of the poses and added it in later on. Now let's move on to the CG. I went for both of his arms being stretched up for his pose and the shoulders and head being angled in different directions. One of the arms has more foreshortening. The pose looks expressive here since the arms are pretty stretched out. As I was drawing the outfit, I wanted to make sure all parts would form a nice silhouette. His flowing jacket sleeves and long hair make the illustration more dynamic here. I went with pink light from the light and blue rim light on the left. I also showed the pink light on his face here. Making the belts look good, paying attention to the perspective and how they would be wrapping around the body was a bigger struggle for me here. I also added in a shoe to show that Kaya has one of his legs lifted up. Finally, I once again made the pants more shiny and painted over different parts. Kaya would definitely be the very expressive, fun member of this idol group here. He would probably also be very good at talking to fans and to anyone, and he would also dance the most on stage. Alright, some idol characters Kaya, who is an ENTP, would be similar to, for me, would include Natsume, Kuro, Hiyori, Wataru, Kaoru, and Leo from Ensemble Stars, Yonosuke, Momo and Nagi from Idol 7, Kento and Mikado from B Project, as well as Ramuda, Ifumi and Gentaro from Hypnosis Mic. The final character I draw is Diluc. I drew 2 poses for these full body illustrations of Diluc, one where he had his arms crossed and one where he had one hand on the hip as well as one hand stretched out. Since Diluc is a rather closed-off person, I wanted to show this in the poses here, especially with the crossed arms for example. I gave him a shirt and jeans that were both rather tight and flat shoes. For the idol version, I also decided to change up his ponytail and make it high up on his head. High or low ponytail Diluc? What do you prefer? Now we move on to the colors. For the modern outfit, I went with black jeans, shirt and shoes. His outfit is just mostly black, mainly because I could see him wearing mostly black and not really colorful outfits. It's similar to his in-game design. The only colorful part in this idol outfit would be his shirt, which I made red, fitting to his hair. As accessoires for the modern outfit, I added in a necklace, a ring and bracelet and some jewelry around his belt. Then I also added in a smaller leg accessoire. The legs looked too long and thin to me, so I made them shorter. The shoulders for the crossed arms also looked too rounded to me, so I got some references and adjusted this. Then after I had drawn these full body illustrations of Diluc, we move on to the CG illustration. For this illustration I went with a pose where Diluc had both arms lifted up, his head and shoulders are also tilted in different directions. I wanted the pose to be a bit more dynamic with this. After a while I also changed up his legs so that they would be further apart. I referenced my idol designs from the full body illustration for drawing the outfit. The outfit's only flowy part really is the cape, the rest is pretty tight except for the accessoires. Because of this I wanted the cape as well as his hair to be in motion to make the pose feel more dynamic. I added a pinkish light from the right and a bluish one from the back. Other than that I went with my regular shading approach for each color. Things I changed up here were his head, hair and face as well as the size of the right hand. It was too big at first. I noticed that I drew the waistband for the pants pretty high up at first and made this lower. I also adjusted the width of his body and the accessoires a bit. Finally I made his pants more shiny and painted over some parts. Alright, and Diluc would definitely not talk much when it comes to any events. On stage he would also not use the most expressive, elegant dance moves, focus on more simple, powerful ones. Diluc is an INTJ like Dainsleif, and a few idol anime characters he reminds me of and that have the same or a similar MBTI type would be Tsukasa, Soma, Jun, Rei, Kohaku and Ritsu from Ensemble Stars, Ten, Tamaki and Yamato from Idolish 7, Goshi and Miroku from B Project, as well as Samatoki, Doppo and Ryo from Hypnosis Mic. And on the final images you also see I drew expressions, but I won't talk about this in this video. You can look forward to a future one. Overall I just drew the expressions in a separate file and I want to use them for something else as well, and when I finished working on that I will also make a video about this. I hope you look forward to it. Finally I'll also mention other idol fandoms and how they remind me of the characters, and here I'm going more of the dynamics, mentioning the whole group and other groups their dynamic reminds me of. First we have Knights from Ensemble Stars. The dynamic between Leo and Tsukasa could kind of fit to Kaya and Diluc here, and then Dainsleif could be like Izumi, I think. Next for Eden, Kaya would be a lot like Hiyori to me here, while Diluc could be like June. Dainsleif kinda is a mix of both Ibara and Ran to me, so yeah, it kinda remind me of them. Then we'd have Undead as well as Fine, and here Kaoru or Wataru is clearly Kaya to me, and for the other members I'm a bit unsure. I think Rei or Eiichi fit to both Diluc and Dainsleif here, so basically the dynamic between Kaoru and Rei or Eiichi and Wataru is similar to Kaya and Diluc or Kaya and Dainsleif. Then for Idolish 7, they also remind me kind of Trigger. Diluc as well as Dainsleif would fit to Ten or Gaku to me. Since they both have the same MBTI type, I'm not sure here. In case you know Idolish 7, do you think Diluc or Dainsleif fit more to Ten or to Gaku? And Kaya would then fit to Ryunosuke to me. And for Hypnosis Mic, I could imagine their dynamic being similar to that of Matenro there. Since I said Kaya reminds me of Hifumi, who is a sweet talker definitely, I would mention Doppo for Diluc here, while Doppo and Hifumi have a best friends dynamic who both have their own struggles and insecurities. In a different world where Kaya and Diluc get along, I could imagine their dynamic being close to theirs, and Dainsleif would then be the wiser, older Jakurai. Now mentioning idol groups that I think this group, Nebulous, would be similar to, music and aesthetic wise. From Ensemble Stars we'd have Undead, Valkyrie and Trickster, then from Idolish 7 Trigger, from B Project Fry, from Hypnosis Mic Mad Trigger Crew, from AA side or Agonavis Phantom Iris, from Tsukiata or Vazrock, the group Vazi, from Tsuki Pro, the group Quell, and from Paradox Life, the groups 1NM8 and Ampoule. And I also wanted to include Act Addict actors here, because I like the fandom a lot, and yeah, I, for example, recently drew Ensemble Stars characters with poses from there. And in Act Addict actors you have these 4 groups based on the 4 seasons, and I also kind of sorted the idol groups to them, and for this idol group I think they would fit to the winter troupe. Let me know about all the fandoms I'm mentioning in this video you also know. And that would be it for the first idol group. What do you think about them? Could you see Dainsleif, Kaya and Diluc in an idol group? What kind of songs would they sing in your opinion, and what kind of idols would they be? I hope you enjoyed seeing me draw the characters. You can look forward to the next parts for this series about the Genshin Idol AU. If you want to, leave guesses for what characters could also be in the future groups, or you can just tell me what groups you would imagine Genshin Impact characters could be in as idols, including which characters would be together in a group, what kind of music they would make, and so on. Thank you for watching, have a nice day, and bye.